students, I Rajeshwari Shirkanhalli welcome you all in Nagesh Karazgi Orchid School channel. In the last chapter, that is chapter number 5, the fundamental units of life. In that we have discussed about a cell. What is a cell? It is the smallest unit of a living organism. It is also called as structural and building block of living organism. We have discussed that a cell has different components which perform different functions. Now, do you know what is a group of cells called? Yes, you are right. It is called as a tissue. So, in this chapter we are going to discuss about a tissue. A tissue is nothing but a group of cells. In this chapter we are going to study the plant tissues and animal tissues. Now, plant tissues are of two types. They are meristematic tissue and permanent tissue. Again, permanent tissue is divided into different subtypes. Mainly there are two subtypes. One is called as simple permanent tissue and the second one is complex permanent tissue. Now, what are simple permanent tissues? They are parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma, and complex permanent tissues are phloem and xylem. After that we are going to study about animal tissues. So, we will start the introductory part of chapter number 6, that is tissues. Okay, just recall chapter number 5. You have learnt in chapter number 5 that there are two types of the living organisms are there. They are unicellular and multicellular. Unicellular organism means the whole body is made up of a single cell, and that is why all the functions are carried by that single cell. And whereas multicellular organisms means their body is made up of many cells, and there are specialized cells for carrying specific activities. So, we will start with our chapter, that is tissues. So, chapter number 6, tissues. Okay, from the last chapter we recall that all living organisms are made of cells. Okay, so all the living organisms are made up of cells. That is why cell is called as the basic unit of life. Now, in unicellular organisms, a single cell performs all basic functions. So, we have discussed in chapter number 5 that unicellular, in the word unicellular, uni stand for one. So, unicellular means the whole body is made up of only one cell, a single cell, and this single cell performs all basic functions. For example, amoeba. In amoeba, a single cell carries out movement, intake of food and respiratory gases, respiration and excretion. So, different life processes are carried out in amoeba with the help of that single cell. So, amoeba moves with the help of that cell, it takes in food, it exchanges the respiratory gases, it undergoes respiration and excretion. So, all these body functions are carried out by a single cell in amoeba. But in multicellular organisms there are millions of cells. So, here as you know, the multicellular means, in this word multi means many. That means these living organisms are made of many cells. So, there are millions of cells are there, and most of these cells are specialized to carry out a few functions. So, as in multicellular organisms there are many cells, millions of cells are there, and that is why different cells perform different functions. In unicellular there is only one cell, that is why all the functions are carried out by that single cell. But in multicellular there are specialized cells to carry out few functions. So, each specialized function is taken up by a different group of cells. Okay, so, at different sites, at different places in the body, there are different type of group of cells are found which perform specialized function. Since these cells carry out only a particular function, they do it very efficiently. So, as how if all the work is given to a single person, he or she is not able to do it properly. But if suppose the work is divided into many people and it is told to do only a particular type of work in which that group of people are very efficient, then the work is done very properly. In the same way, here in multicellular organisms also, there are group of cells found in different parts of the body, and these group of cells perform specialized functions, and that too very efficiently. Now, in human beings, muscle cells are there, they contract and relax to cause movement. Okay, so in the human body we find muscle cells. What is the function of muscle cells? During the movement they contract and relax. Similarly, there are nerve cells which carry messages. As you know that nerve cells carry the messages from the brain to different target sites. Then there is a blood which flows to transport oxygen, food, hormones and waste materials and so on. So, blood is the fluid which is present in human body, and when the blood flows it carry different substances with it. Mainly the blood carry oxygen, it also carry food. Food means the digested food, that is all the nutrients which is absorbed in the blood is carried to each and every cell of the body. Similarly, different hormones and waste materials are also carried to the excretory organs. So, this is done by blood. Now, we will talk about plants. In plants, there are vascular tissues, conduct food and water from one part to another part. So, there are vascular tissues. Which are those? Mainly xylem and phloem. So, what is the function of xylem? It carries water. Along with water, it carries the dissolved salts also which are there in the water. And the second vascular tissue is phloem. Phloem carries food. So, these vascular tissues carry water and food to different parts. So, multicellular organisms show division of labor, means the work is divided, different cells perform different functions in multicellular organism, but this is not possible in unicellular organism. In unicellular only one cell is there in the whole body, and that is why all the functions are carried out by that single cell. And whereas in multicellular organism there are group of cells and they perform different functions, that is called as division of labor. The cells specializing in one function are often grouped together in the body. So, in the body we find a group of cells in which all the cells are alike and they are similar to each other. Alike means they are similar to each other and they perform one function, same function. Okay, so like how we divide the students class wise, grade wise, like that in the body the group of cells are divided based on what function they carry. So, at one side whatever the group of cells are there, they all are similar to each other, and that is why they perform one function and they perform it very efficiently. This means that a particular function is carried out by a cluster of cells. What is meant by cluster? Group. So, a particular function is carried out by a group of cells at a definite place in the body. This cluster of cells called tissue is arranged and designed so as to give the highest possible efficiency of function. So, there are groups of the cells which are also called as cluster of the cells. So, what are these cluster of cells called? They are called as tissues, and these tissues are arranged and designed in such a way that they give the highest possible efficiency of that particular function. Now, blood, phloem and muscle are some of the examples of tissues. In this chapter, we are going to study more about the different type of tissues found in plants and in animals. A few examples are given here, that is blood, then phloem and muscle. A group of cells that are similar in structure and or work together to achieve a particular function forms a tissue. What's a tissue? It is a group of cells and all the cells in that group are similar in structure and they perform together to achieve one particular function, that is called as a tissue. So, if the question is asked define tissue, what you are supposed to write? A group of cells that are similar in structure and or work together to achieve a particular function forms a tissue. Okay, so that is just the introductory part. Now, we will move to the first concept of the chapter. Now, there is a question for you. Are plants and animals made of same type of tissues? Just think it over. Yes, your answer is right. The plant tissues and animal tissues are different. Now, let us compare their structure and functions. Do plants and animals have the same structure? No. Do they both perform similar functions? Some of the functions are similar and whereas there are some functions which are different. Now, let us move to that. Let us see what are the functions performed by plant tissues and what are the functions performed by animal tissues. There are noticeable differences between the two. Okay, very easily we can differentiate that this is a plant and this is an animal. Why? Because they are totally different from each other. So, we find there are noticeable differences. What are the differences? The first one is plants are stationary or fixed, means they don't move. Have you seen plants moving from one place to another? No, it is not possible. They are held intact in the soil with the help of roots of the plants, means plants cannot move, they cannot go from one place to another place. That means they are stationary. And whereas we know that animals are locomotive. Locomotive means they move from one place to another place in search of food, shelter and so on. So, there is one difference, that plants cannot move, they are stationary, and whereas animals are locomotive. Most of the tissues the plants have are supportive, which provides them with structural strength. As plants cannot go from one place to another place, they remain at that place only, but plants should be very strong. They should overcome the adverse situations like very heavy rainfall, wind, etc. So, for that they should have more strength. So, most of the tissues in the plants are supportive and they provide them structural strength. Most of these tissues are dead, since dead cells can provide mechanical strength as easily as live ones and need less maintenance. So, in the plant cells we find dead cells. These dead cells form the bark of the tree, and as you know that bark of the tree provide strength, mechanical strength to the plants. That is why mostly there are dead cells in the plants, and they also provide strength as easily as live ones, but these dead cells require very less maintenance also. Okay, so what we have seen, plants are stationary, means they cannot move. Second one is mostly the tissues of the plant are supportive, means they support them by providing structural strength. The third one, most of the tissues in plant are dead and they give mechanical strength to the plants, and dead cells require less maintenance. Now, let us discuss about animal tissues. Animals on the other hand move around in search of food, mates and shelter. You know that plants are photosynthetic. Plants prepare their own food with the help of chlorophyll, carbon dioxide, sunlight, etc. So, they need not to search the food. But what about animals? Animals cannot prepare their own food. So, they have to go to different places for searching food. That is why they move around in search of food. Similarly, for searching mates, mates means friends as well as partners for reproduction, and similarly for getting shelter they go from one place to another place. They consume more energy as compared to plants. So, as plants have to keep on moving here and there, they have to go to different places for searching food, mates and shelter. For that they require more energy. That is why plants consume less energy, but animals consume more energy as compared to plants. Now, most of the tissues they contain are living. So, in plants we find mainly dead tissues, and whereas in animals we find most of the tissues are living tissues. Another difference between animals and plants is in the pattern of growth. The growth in plants is limited to certain regions, while this is not so in animals. Okay, so the growth in plants is in certain regions. Its shoot grows, branches, leaves, flowers, fruits, etc. And whereas in animals, the growth is not limited to certain regions. Each and every part of the body grows. There are some tissues in plants that divide throughout their life. These tissues are localized in certain regions. So, in plants we find dividing tissues. They are called as meristematic tissues, and these meristematic tissues are found in certain regions. Mainly they are found in the tip of shoot and tip of roots. Now, based on the dividing capacity of the tissues, various plant tissues can be classified as growing or meristematic tissue and permanent tissue. So, these are the two main type of tissues in plants. One is meristematic tissue, which is also called as growing tissue, and the second one is permanent tissue. Now, cell growth in animals is more uniform. So, there is no such demarcation of dividing and non-dividing regions in animals. So, in animals we find the similar type of cell growth. It is uniform, and that is why there are no regions like at some region there are dividing tissues and at some region there are non-dividing tissues. It is not found in the animals like that. The structural organization of organs and organ systems is far more specialized and localized in complex animals than even in very complex plants. So, this fundamental difference reflects the different modes of life pursued by these two major group of organisms, particularly in their different feeding methods. So, what is the next difference? The difference is in the structural organization of organs and organ systems. These are more specialized in animals as compared to plants. So, this fundamental difference reflects the different modes of life by plants and animals, particularly in their different feeding methods. Also, they are differently adapted for a sedentary existence on the hand, that is plants, and active locomotion on the other, that is animals, contributing to this difference in organ system design. So, because of the difference in the organ systems, they adapt to different methods. The plants are sedentary. Sedentary means they are non-moving, they are stationary, they are present at one place, and whereas animals are locomotive, means they can move from one place to another place. So, these are some of the differences between plants and animals. What is the first difference? Plants are stationary, means not moving, whereas animals are locomotive, means they move from place to place. The second difference is plants are autotrophic, means they can prepare their own food, whereas animals are heterotrophic, means they cannot prepare their own food. They are dependent on some plants or animals for getting the food. So, as plants prepare their own food, they are stationary, no need to go anywhere for searching the food, and whereas animals are heterotrophic, means they cannot prepare their own food. That is why they have to go to other places for searching food, for searching mates, and even for searching shelter. The next difference we have discussed is in plants most of the tissues are dead tissues, means it consists of dead cells, and these dead cells provide mechanical support to the plants. Plants need more mechanical support. Why? Because they cannot go from one place to another place to get rid of heavy rain or wind, etc. They have to withstand there only. So, for that they need extra support, and whereas animals, as they can go to other places, so in animals mostly we find living tissues, not dead tissues. So, that is the another difference. The next difference is in plants the organization or organ system is not so much specialized as in animals. In animals we find there is more specialized organ systems. So, there are different organs found in the animals. So, because of these differences easily we can differentiate the plants and animals. Now, in animals mainly there are two tissues. One is meristematic tissue, that is also called as growing tissue, and the second one is permanent tissue. Again, permanent tissues are having subtypes which we are going to discuss in the coming sections. While in the animal tissues there are no like dividing or non-dividing tissues, because all the function of the tissues are little bit uniform. Now, in the plant the dividing tissues are found only in certain regions, that is the meristematic tissue or growing tissue is found in the tips of roots and tip of stems or shoots, and whereas there is no such demarcation of dividing and non-dividing tissue in animals. So, these are some of the basic differences between plants and animals. Now, let us move to the next point. It is with reference to these complex animals and plant bodies that we will now talk about the concept of tissues in some more detail. Okay, so, with reference to plants and animals, we will discuss the different type of tissues in more detail. Now, let us begin with plant tissue. So, as I have told, plant tissue is mainly of two types. One is meristematic tissue and the second one is permanent tissue. Now, let us discuss about meristematic tissue. For understanding about this tissue, there is a small activity given. You can see here in the figure, there are two jars kept in which onion bulbs are there. Growth of onion bulbs can be seen here in both the jars. These are the roots of onion bulbs. So, in this activity what you have to do is take two glass jars and fill them with water. So, two glass jars you have to take and you have to fill both the glass jars with water. Now, take two onion bulbs and place one on each jar as shown here in the figure. Just now I showed you the figure. One onion bulb in each jar you have to place. Now, observe the growth of roots in both the bulbs for a few days. Measure the length of roots on day 1, day 2, day 3. So, for 3 days you have to observe the length of roots grown in both the jars. On day 4, cut the root tips of onion bulb in jar 2 by about 1 centimeter. After this, observe the growth of roots in again both the jars and measure their lengths each day for few days and record the observations in tables like the table given below. So, here there is a table given, length in jar 1 on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4 and day 5, and in jar 2 also for all the 5 days. Now, for example, in the on day 1 the length of roots in first jar is about 3 centimeters. The same growth we will find in second jar also, and day 2 suppose it is 3.5, even this is also 3.5. On day 3 also suppose the growth is 4 centimeter in jar 1, then we find the same length of roots in jar 2 also, that is 4 centimeters. Then day 4, the length of roots we find it is 4.5 centimeter, but whereas in jar 2 we find the length of roots 4 centimeter only, and on day 5 the length of roots in jar 1 is 5 centimeter for example, and in jar 2 again it is 4 centimeter. Can you guess why the length of roots are not increasing in jar 2 on day 4 and day 5? Yes. So, there is no increase in the length of the roots. What it suggests? Why there is not increase in the length of the roots? Means the roots in the second jar have stopped growing, isn't it? The length is not increasing means they are not growing. So, from the above observations, answer the following questions. The first question is, which of the two onions has longer roots? Obviously, jar 1 has longer roots. Why? Because in jar 2, removal of the root tip stops the root growth. Okay, so in jar 2, what is happened? The root tip we have cut, and because of this there is no more growth in the root tip in jar 2. That means root tips are necessary for increasing length, means roots grow only because of root tips. When we cut the root tips, we cut some important material from that, and due to that roots do not grow in jar 2. The second question is, do the roots continue growing even after we have removed their tips? No. If we remove the tips of the roots, they do not continue growing. That is why in jar 2 we find on day 4 and day 5 the same length of roots as seen on day 3. But in jar 1 root tips have not got removed. So, there is continuous increase in the length of root tips. Now, the third question for you is, why would the tips stop growing in jar 2 after we cut them? Just think, why the roots stop growing in second jar when we cut their tips? Because growth in plants occur due to meristematic tissue. Meristematic tissue is also called as growing tissue. The meristematic tissue has regions like apical, lateral and intercalary. When we cut the onion root tip, what happens? The apical meristem tissues are cut off, which is responsible for the increase in length. As a result, the growth of root is stopped. Okay, so the growth of plants occurs only in certain specific regions. This is because the dividing tissue, which is known as meristematic tissue, is located only at these points. So, depending on the region where they are present, meristematic tissues are classified as apical, lateral and intercalary. New cells are produced by meristem are initially like those of meristem itself, but as they grow and mature, their characteristics slowly change and they become differentiated as components of other tissues. Now, in this figure you can see it is a meristematic tissue, and these are the different parts of the meristematic tissue. This is which is present at the tip, which is responsible for the elongation of length, means length of root and shoot grows because of presence of this apical meristem. Intercalary meristem is present at the basis of leaves and branches, and lateral meristem is responsible for increasing the girth or width of the meristem. So, these are the three types of meristematic tissues. So, location of this meristematic tissue in plant body is shown here. So, students, what we have discussed today, first of all we started recalling the concept of cells. As you know that cells are of two types, unicellular and multicellular. Unicellular means all the functions are made up of only a single cell. Why? Because unicellular means the body is made up of only one cell, and multicellular organisms means the body is made of many cells. So, there are different group of cells are there which perform different functions. So, after that we discussed that the tissues are different in plants and animals based on their structure. We have seen different features of plants and animal tissues. We have differentiated the plant tissue and animal tissue. We have discussed many things which are different in plants and animals. After that we started with plant tissue. We have discussed the activity 6.1 which is suggested to do. So, you all are going to perform this activity at home and find your own results. So, we have discussed that the growth is mainly due to the apical meristem. Meristematic tissue is divided into three parts: apical, lateral and intercalary. We will continue this concept in the next period. Today here we will stop. Just go through the concepts and do the activity 6.1. Thank you.